Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal the week beginning June 16, 2025, on General Hospital promises to erupt with emotional twists, bold decisions, and unexpected confrontations that will shake the entire town of Port Charles. As summer begins to spread its heat, it's the secrets being revealed and relationships pushed to the brink of collapse that truly set the screen on fire. Amid the familiar settings of the hospital, courtroom, and local bar, three central figures. Willow, Emma, and Lulu, each deliver a shock of their own, setting in motion a chain of intertwined events that viewers won't be able to look away from. Willow is preparing to announce a decision that will stun her family and community. Emma unexpectedly takes control in a critical showdown, while Lulu, emotionally unsettled, turns to Isaiah for an evening that could alter the course of her life forever. These developments are not merely personal turning points, but the opening chapter of a storm that threatens to engulf even the strongest characters in Port Charles. First, Willow had always prided herself on her quiet strength, her ability to remain composed in the face of devastation. But that strength finally shattered the moment the judge ruled against her in court, stripping her of custody rights to Wiley and Amelia. The courtroom was silent, but inside Willow's chest, a storm raged. Her breathing became shallow, her vision blurred, and the walls of the room closed in around her. By the time she was escorted out of the building, her knees buckled under the weight of despair, and she collapsed in the arms of a nurse who happened to recognize her. It was the beginning of a medical and emotional emergency that no one in Port Charles had anticipated, not even those who had stood by her side through every prior trauma. At the hospital, Willow drifted in and out of consciousness. The doctors initially diagnosed a panic attack induced by emotional trauma, but something felt off. Her body temperature fluctuated wildly. Her heart rate was erratic. The blankness in her eyes didn't just speak of emotional exhaustion, it suggested a deeper disconnection from reality. Blood tests were run, though many believed they would confirm only dehydration and stress. But the attending nurse quietly requested additional panels. She had seen Willow collapse once before under mysterious conditions, just months before discovering she was pregnant with Amelia. The pattern was too familiar, too chilling to ignore. Back in her hospital bed, Willow remained silent, her fingers twitching occasionally, her mind seemingly lost in a fog of dread and confusion. Michael tried to visit but was turned away. Drew never came. Nina, driven by both guilt and maternal instinct, sat at Willow's bedside, unsure whether to hold her hand or apologize. In that sterile room, Willow began to piece together memories, fragmented images of a night when grief clouded her judgment and loneliness pushed her into Drew's arms. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. It was survival, a moment of numb desperation that now threatened to define the rest of her life. And then the results came in. Willow was pregnant again. The news wasn't met with the joyful anticipation of a new life, it was met with silence, then a whisper of horror. This wasn't the child she had hoped for, not under these circumstances, not with this man. Nina, the first to know, received the news with trembling hands and tearful eyes. The betrayal she had once committed against Willow paled in comparison to the anguish Willow now faced. What could she say? How could she help? But Willow didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stared at the ceiling, lips pressed together in a line that revealed more agony than any outburst ever could. The revelation hit Port Charles like an aftershock following an earthquake. Drew, when he was finally informed, showed no visible reaction. Perhaps he had suspected. Perhaps he had hoped. But what he didn't do was take responsibility. Instead, he distanced himself, offering shallow promises of support while refusing to publicly acknowledge the child. He claimed it was for Willow's protection, but everyone saw it for what it was: cowardice, selfishness, and a man trying to protect his image as the perfect savior. For Willow, his betrayal was complete. She had trusted him at her lowest moment, and now he abandoned her in her most vulnerable one. Willow's physical condition continued to deteriorate. Her vitals remained unstable, and a new wave of complications emerged, severe fatigue, hormonal imbalances, and unexplained bleeding. The medical team scrambled to understand what was happening, but the emotional weight of her situation clearly exacerbated the problem. Her body was rejecting the stress, and perhaps even the pregnancy itself. Yet Willow refused to consider termination. Not out of religious conviction or personal philosophy, but because this child, however conceived, might be her last chance to hold on to something real, something that hadn't yet been taken from her by courts, betrayals, or grief. As the week progressed, the corridors of General Hospital grew thick with tension. Everyone had an opinion. Carly tried to intervene, but her involvement only stoked old resentments. Sasha, who had once shared a deep friendship with Willow, watched from afar, unsure whether she could offer comfort or if her presence would only deepen the pain. Meanwhile, Michael remained conflicted, torn between the woman he still loved and the children he now raised alone. Through it all, Willow remained in that hospital room, a tragic figure lost between two versions of her future, one stolen, one uncertain, and both equally terrifying. Her announcement was not just the revelation of a pregnancy. It was a cry for help, a declaration of brokenness, and the beginning of a new chapter written in heartbreak. Second, Emma had always been a perfectionist, the kind of student and researcher who never missed a deadline, never cut corners, and never allowed emotion to interfere with duty. So when she lost the coveted research assistant position to Jocelyn, it wasn't just a professional disappointment, it was a personal affront. She had grown up under the shadows of legends, with parents like Robin and Patrick, and being overlooked in favor of someone with less academic rigor felt like betrayal wrapped in humiliation. Emma tried to stay composed, but beneath the surface, she was seething. The whispers in the lab, the knowing glances from faculty, and Jocelyn's smug expressions only fueled her quiet resentment. Driven by a mixture of wounded pride and suspicion, Emma began to watch Jocelyn closely. She noticed her colleagues' erratic behavior, the long unexplained absences, the encrypted emails she never logged out of, and worst of all, her strange interest in the personal phone of Professor Hank, a respected but enigmatic figure in their department. One late evening, Emma witnessed Jocelyn discreetly scrolling through the professor's locked files under the guise of compiling data. That was the final straw. Emma, believing she had caught her rival in a blatant act of academic misconduct, documented everything and submitted a formal complaint to the university's ethics committee. It was her way of taking back control, of restoring the honor she felt had been stolen from her. But what Emma didn't realize was that her actions had just triggered something far larger than a petty academic rivalry. Jocelyn wasn't just a student with ambition. She was a covert WSB operative, embedded in the university to investigate a highly sensitive matter involving Professor Hank and his potential ties to a rogue international bioterrorism cell. The files Jocelyn had accessed weren't grades or student records, they were encrypted logs detailing unauthorized chemical orders and encrypted communications with known syndicate contacts. By reporting Jocelyn, Emma unknowingly compromised an active operation that had taken months to orchestrate, blowing Jocelyn's cover and possibly endangering both of their lives. The fallout was immediate and severe. WSB agents arrived under the guise of federal investigators to contain the situation, pulling Emma into a secret briefing where she learned the devastating truth, that her sense of justice had collided with national security. Emma was left reeling. Everything she thought she knew about Jocelyn, about the research department, even about the university itself, had been an illusion masking something infinitely darker. But the damage had been done. The operation was now at risk, and Emma, despite her brilliance, had become an unintentional liability in a mission she had never asked to be part of. Haunted by the chaos she'd unleashed, Emma struggled to reconcile her actions. She had acted out of pride, not malice, but the consequences were the same. Jocelyn's cover was shattered, Professor Hank was now aware of the investigation, and the WSB had to relocate several key assets. Worse yet, Emma began to question her own place in the world. Was she merely a brilliant academic with a sharp moral compass, or had she just proven how dangerous knowledge could be in the wrong context? As the week progressed, Emma stood on uncertain ground, watching the remnants of her old world crumble, unsure whether she had uncovered corruption, or simply destroyed something meant to protect them all. Finally, while tensions were mounting behind the scenes of the university and the operation itself teetered on the edge of exposure, Jocelyn Jacks remained calm and razor-focused, determined to see the mission through. Embedded deep within the academic circle as an ordinary student, Jocelyn had spent months weaving a careful web of proximity and access, slowly gaining the trust of the department and its enigmatic star figure, Professor Hank Dalton. Though her outward demeanor was casual and even slightly aloof, beneath the surface was a mind honed by covert training, analytical precision, and a determination fueled by personal stakes. So when her handler Vaughn expressed hesitation about her next move, Jocelyn didn't back down. She had a gut instinct, and for her, that was worth more than protocols and bureaucratic caution. Jocelyn had discovered subtle patterns in Hank's behavior, encrypted communications conducted only at odd hours, random absences disguised as academic leave, and an obsessive habit of never leaving his phone unattended for more than a minute. She knew that whatever he was hiding was not on the university servers, nor in his office files, it was in the device he carried with him at all times, protected by a 6-digit alphanumeric code and facial recognition. Vaughn, cautious as ever, warned her of the risks. One wrong move could trigger counter-surveillance measures or alert Hank that he was under watch. But Jocelyn, piecing together her observations and confident in the backdoor infiltration protocol she developed, insisted it was a calculated risk worth taking. "The phone is the vault," she told him. "Everything else is noise." Her plan was audacious, even for a field agent. She proposed a timed intervention during a university event where Hank would be momentarily distracted, long enough, she believed, for her to clone the device and transmit the contents to WSB servers. Vaughn was skeptical. He reminded her of the diplomatic complications should anything go wrong. The department wasn't just a cover for Hank, it was also a nexus point for visiting researchers with international affiliations. But Jocelyn had already considered every angle. She had mapped out the security cameras, scheduled Wi-Fi dropouts, and even planted a listening bug in the department's copier room to monitor Hank's conversations. She wasn't improvising, she was orchestrating. Still, it wasn't just about the mission anymore. Deep down, Jocelyn felt a gnawing need to prove herself, not just to the agency, but to herself. The betrayal of her mother's trust when she joined WSB still lingered in her conscience. She had left behind a life of safety and comfort, trading it for shadows and surveillance, and this was her moment to show it was all worth it. Vaughn, ever the pragmatic leader, finally relented. He issued a conditional green light, warning her that once she initiated contact with the device, there would be no second chances. Jocelyn accepted the challenge with a solemn nod, already mentally rehearsing every second of her plan. As the operation loomed closer, Jocelyn fine-tuned every variable. Her adrenaline was high, but her hands were steady. She knew the risks. She understood the fallout if she failed. But more than anything, she believed in the clarity of her objective. If the proof of Hank's illicit dealings, his financial ties, his coded orders, his communications with shadow operatives, was truly locked inside that phone, then Jocelyn would be the one to crack it open. And no matter how much Vaughn doubted or how many silent glances warned her to hold back, she was ready. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was the edge of the knife, and she was done waiting. As the week of June 16, 2025, unfolds in General Hospital, the emotional undercurrents continue to build beneath the surface of every interaction, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the unexpected meeting between Lulu and Isaiah. In a dimly lit corner of the Metro Court Lounge, Lulu found herself seated across from Isaiah, their drinks untouched as silence settled between them, a silence heavy with unspoken guilt and unresolved truths. Isaiah, ever the calm observer, listened as Lulu nervously explained her role in revealing Joe's true parentage. She wasn't seeking validation, she was trying to convince herself she had done the right thing. But as her voice quivered on the edges of each word, Isaiah saw a woman who was less certain than she appeared. Isaiah had been many things to the people of Port Charles in recent weeks, a counselor, a confidant, even a spiritual guide of sorts. He had helped Willow confront her emotional collapse, offered Portia clarity in the face of moral compromise, and steadied Sunny before his heart surgery. But with Lulu, his role was different. He wasn't there to guide her toward resolution, he was there to hold a mirror to the decisions she had made and the consequences they had unleashed. Gently, without judgment, he asked her whether her choice to expose the truth had come from a place of justice or a place of vengeance. It was a question Lulu hadn't dared ask herself. As the conversation deepened, Lulu's defenses began to crack. She had always prided herself on her integrity, on never lying to her children. But Isaiah pointed out the irony: how often do parents lie not out of malice, but out of fear? Fear of loss, of rejection, of repeating old mistakes. Lulu realized that her decision to reveal Joe's parentage wasn't as noble as she'd wanted it to be. Part of her had done it to hurt Brooklyn, to hurt Dante, even to hurt Chase. The truth may have been righteous, but her intent was laced with pain. And now, as the dust settled, it was Gio who bore the emotional cost of her choices. The conversation haunted Lulu as she returned home. For all her insistence that she would never deceive her children, she now faced the uncomfortable reality that parenthood wasn't black and white. She had mocked Maxie for making morally flexible choices, but now she could see herself inching toward similar compromises. The line between honesty and cruelty had blurred, and Lulu was no longer sure which side she stood on. She stared at old photos of Gio as a baby, remembering the promises she had made to protect him at all costs. Had she broken those promises in pursuit of truth? Meanwhile, Isaiah returned to his apartment quietly, burdened by the weight of what Lulu had confessed. He had come to Port Charles with no intention of becoming the town's emotional anchor, yet somehow he had become the center of everyone's unraveling. Each secret spilled to him became another stone in his pocket, dragging him deeper into the lives of people who barely understood their own hearts. But even as he questioned his place in this web of confessions, he knew one thing with certainty. Lulu's story was far from over, and the fallout from her choices would ripple through every corner of the town. Back at the hospital, whispers of Willow's pregnancy and Emma's misstep in exposing Jocelyn's WSB identity swirled through the corridors like smoke before a fire. Vaughn, caught between loyalty to the agency and concern for his operative, now had to decide whether to pull Jocelyn out of the university or let the operation continue with increased risk. And in the middle of it all, Jocelyn stood firm, determined to see justice done, just as Lulu once had, just as Emma had believed she was doing. Port Charles was a town full of women carrying the weight of righteous actions with unintended consequences. Outside the city, Brooklyn had begun preparing for a custody battle of her own, and Dante, caught between fatherhood, loyalty, and betrayal, found himself more isolated than ever. Gio, reeling from the revelation of his true parentage, had grown cold and distant, retreating from both Brooklyn and Chase. His trust had been shattered, and the one person he might have turned to, Lulu, was now the very person he blamed for everything. Their once unbreakable bond now felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap at the slightest pull. As night fell over Port Charles, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Secrets had been unearthed. Loyalties tested. Hearts broken. And yet, as always, the story was far from complete. The week had delivered emotional explosions, personal reckonings, and revelations that could not be undone. But the true cost of truth, betrayal, and redemption had only just begun to reveal itself. So as viewers reflect on the week's events, the question remains, which moment struck the deepest chord? Was it Willow's quiet collapse? Emma's miscalculation? Jocelyn's defiance? Or Lulu's slow realization that truth without compassion can destroy more than it heals? Each story thread is a spark, and together, they ignite a blaze that will continue to burn through Port Charles in the weeks to come. Don't look away. The reckoning is just beginning. And in Port Charles, no truth comes without a price.